welcome to South Asia Diary with me, Mariam Wardak. When I say Maldives, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Probably golden beaches or emerald waters. The Maldives has always been captured as paradise on earth, but recently there has been trouble in paradise. Extremism is on the rise across the island. Last year, there was an attack on former President Mohammed Nasheed. A homemade explosive was planted on a vehicle near his home. Nasheed narrowly escaped. This month, there was another attack. The environment minister was assaulted by a knifeman in broad daylight. What explains this extremist streak in the Maldives? On tonight's episode, we take a closer look. Also on the show,
India is all set to commission its first ever indigenous aircraft carrier. We bring you a sneak peek before the much-awaited induction. A mother of two is back in school to complete her education after a gap of 11 years. Her classmates, her two sons. Bangladesh has cut school and office hours in a bid to conserve electricity. How is the power crisis hurting one of Asia's fastest growing economies? Speculation is rife that Sri Lanka's disgraced ex-president Gotabaya Rajapaksa could be plotting a return. How will the public respond to such a return?
a minister being attacked in broad daylight is always worrying. But when it happens in idyllic Maldives, more questions are asked. The country has historically followed a moderate and tolerant strain of Islam. It has always tried to be a welcoming society. Then what explains this recent rise in extremism? Is it driven by religion or politics? Or perhaps a bit of both?
Golden beaches, emerald oceans, and idyllic coves. The internet feeds you a certain image about the Maldives, a paradise tucked away in the Indian Ocean. True, but recently there is trouble in paradise. That was Hulumale, located just north of the capital. The man on the scooter is the environment minister of the country, Ali Soli. He was attacked with a knife in broad daylight. The attacker went for his neck, but thankfully missed. Instead, the knife slit a portion of his left arm. Soli was seen dumping his scooter and fleeing the spot. The attacker was immediately apprehended by the police. He was heard mouthing verses from the Quran on the road. The attack is not an isolated incident. Recently, extremism has raised its ugly head in the country. In 2021, former President Mohammed Nasheed was attacked. Homemade explosives were planted on a bike near his home. Nasheed narrowly escaped. He was transferred to Germany for months of therapy. The police blamed religious extremists for the attack. In June this year, there was another incident. Yoga Day celebrations in Mali were interrupted by an extremist mob. They thrashed the participants, destroyed chairs, and overturned the tables of food arranged at the location. Their justification? Yoga is apparently blasphemous because it involves praying to the sun. Such attacks raise questions about Maldivian society. Traditionally, it has been a moderate country. Islam was always the dominant religion, but extremism was never an issue. The current government is also known for its liberal democratic policies. So what explains this recent streak? Experts point to two factors. One is the influx of extremist thought in the 1970s and 80s. College education abroad played an important role. So did mosque funds from Saudi Arabia. Many Muslims began to embrace Saudi Wahhabism and Deobandism. They traveled to distant lands in search of jihad, to Pakistan, Afghanistan, even Syria and Iraq. In fact, the Maldives had the highest per capita contribution of foreign terrorists. They had close links to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Today, the Maldives police estimates that there are at least 1,400 extremists in the country. The problem is, they get political support. Remember the extremist attack on Yoga Day? Many reports linked it to this man, former President Abdullah Yameen. Yameen is plotting his political comeback with an anti-India campaign. He calls it India Out. Unless there is political opposition, extremism cannot be defeated. If leaders milk extremism for political gains, such attacks will be repeated. South Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Bangladesh was once touted as the next Asian tiger, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. But the war in Ukraine has taken the wind out of their sails. The global energy crisis is taking a heavy toll on Bangladesh. The government has cut 1 day off the regular school calendar. Offices will also work 1 hour less. The idea is to conserve energy wherever possible. We look at how this power crisis could derail the Bangladesh growth story.
As night falls, Dhaka plunges into darkness. The faint glow of streetlights is missing across town. So is the power of heavy-duty generators. This is the new normal in Bangladesh. Long hours of power cuts and load shedding. Bangladesh's energy woes began with the Ukraine war. Some quick facts first. Around 75% of energy here is produced from gas, LNG, or liquefied natural gas. Since the war in Ukraine, LNG has become tough to access, even tougher to buy. Most countries are abandoning their long-term LNG contracts. Instead, they are selling to Europe. Europe is replacing Russian gas with LNG. The result? There is none for Bangladesh. Since February, Dhaka has been buying 2 or 3 cargoes every month from the spot market. The problem with that? It's a lot more expensive. Reports say Bangladesh is halting spot purchases from August. Instead, they are cutting consumption. 1 extra day has been taken off the school calendar. In Bangladesh, most schools are off on Friday. From now on, Saturday too will be a holiday.
I have a school. I haven't been able to set up a generator there yet. In this situation, the children are suffering a lot. And I have already said that I couldn't sleep. We are suffering a lot, at least from the power cuts. It was not at this high rate before.
Public offices and banks will also work less. Daily hours have been reduced from 8 to 7. The idea is to conserve energy. Food and fuel prices have been rising consistently since February, when the war broke out. Last month, fuel prices were increased by 50%. In many places, there were small protests against the move. Bangladesh is also seeking foreign assistance. Their government is in talks with the IMF for a $4.5 billion bailout. Dhaka calls it preemptive, but experts are not so sure. Bangladesh's foreign exchange reserves stood at $45 billion last year. Now, just $39 billion. So there are fears of a Sri Lanka-like crisis in Bangladesh. To prevent that, Bangladesh is easing up on fuel imports. It is cutting consumption at schools and offices. But what if the power crisis hits Bangladesh's factories, especially the garment factories? The country's $416 billion economy is heavily dependent on clothing exports. But recently, the sector has hit a slump. Demand in foreign markets is slipping. Naturally, people don't want new clothes amid rising inflation. Plus, the factories are struggling with their bottom line. This slowdown is trickling down to the Bangladesh economy. The common man is feeling the pinch.
I'm buying rice at 70 taka per kilogram, which used to be 40 taka per kg. We used to buy unbottled soybean oil at 70 taka because our income is so low. Now the oil price has reached 200 taka, but my salary has not increased in the last 2 years, and I don't know what my condition has become.
How can Bangladesh tide over the crisis? Power cuts are not a viable long-term solution. Dhaka must explore other sources to buy cheaper fuel. Their government is already looking at Russian energy companies. They are selling fuel at cheaper rates. Equally important is the systemic change. Bangladesh's economy is not diversified enough. It is too dependent on the garment industry. But to sustain the economic momentum of the last decade, Bangladesh must explore new industries. The IMF bailout could be a start for that. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Imagine going back to school after having 2 children. Sounds tough, doesn't it? Now imagine studying in the same classroom as your 11-year-old son. It takes a lot of courage and determination. This mother of 2 in Nepal has both. She stopped going to school at the age of 15 when she eloped with her future husband. Now, 11 years later, she wants to finish her education. While inspirational, this is also the unfortunate situation in Nepal. Only 40% of women can read and write. 70% of girls drop out of school by 16. It is the untold crisis of Nepalese society.
Parvati Sunar is busy dressing up for school. She puts on her uniform, neatly ties up her hair, and heads out with her classmates. 2 young boys who also happen to be her children. Sunar abandoned her education at the age of 15. She eloped with her future husband to India. Now, 11 years later, she is back to complete it.
I got married at a young age. After that, I went to India with my husband. Everyone used to talk in English over there. I found it very difficult because of not knowing English. It inspired me to learn.
Sunar's story is all too common in Nepal. Only 57% women here are literate. 70% of the girls drop out of school by the age of 16. Many of them are married off. According to UNICEF, there are 5 million child brides in Nepal. Sunar too was one of them. She had her first child at the age of 16. Academics are not exactly Sunar's strong suit. But according to the principal, she is a keen learner.
She's not as talented, but her son is talented. He has become her support.
After school, Sunar returns to her daily life. She lives here in this tin-roofed structure. On some days, she gets busy with household chores, like feeding the goats or cooking. On other days, she heads to the local computer center with her son. How do other students react to Parvati Sunar? They are surprisingly welcoming.
When I study, I help sister in studies and she helps me too. She scolds me when I don't do my homework.
Sunar's husband is still back in India. He works as a laborer in the southern city of Chennai. Occasionally, she speaks to him over video call. Sunar's family belongs to the Dalit community. They slot in at the bottom of the Hindu caste system, so the challenge is multifold. Gender bias is ingrained in Nepalese culture. The country ranks 115th out of 162 countries on the Gender Equity Index. Legally, a lot of progress has been made. The 2015 Constitution guarantees gender equality. It has also reserved 33% of seats in policy making for women. But the mindset is yet to change. Nepal has one of the highest child marriage rates anywhere in the world. Girls are either denied schooling or drop out before college. That needs to change. Women like Parvati Sonar must become the norm, not the exception. South Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
India is still set to welcome a new warship to its arsenal. Not just any warship, the biggest one ever built in India. It's called the INS Vikrant. The ship is the first ever aircraft carrier to be designed and built by India. Once commissioned, India will join an elite group of countries to have done so. But beyond the symbolism, what does this ship offer the Indian Navy? What kind of firepower does it hold? Let's take a sneak peek.
This is India's floating fortress, INS Vikrant. It is the largest ship ever built in India. Also, the country's first ever indigenous aircraft carrier. It has undergone multiple rounds of sea trials since August last year. Now, it's ready to be commissioned. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will make the trip down to Kochi on the western coast. September 2nd is D-Day, when this 45,000-ton engineering marvel hits the waves. For India, it's a dream come true. Only a handful of countries have designed and built their own carriers: China, Russia, the United States, France and Britain. Next month, India will join that elite club.
The impending commissioning of the indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant is indeed historic, for it gives us the ability as a country to join a few select nations who are able to design and construct aircraft carriers.
Vikrant had a predecessor of the same name. It was laid down as HMS Hercules for the British Navy during World War II. But construction was never completed. India purchased the vessel in 1957 and finished the work. Thus the first INS Vikrant was born. It played a crucial role in enforcing the blockade on East Pakistan during the 1971 war. Years later, in 1997, it was decommissioned. The new ship is a tribute to that rich legacy. The Vikrant was built at a cost of 20,000 crore rupees. Its keel was laid back in 2009. The carrier is 262 meters long, 62 meters wide. It holds 2,200 compartments, which can host a crew of 1,600 people.
The amount of steel which has been used in the ship is enough to perhaps make 4 Eiffel Towers. To cater for about 1,500 people, there are about 10,000 chapatis or rotis which are made in the ship's kitchen, which we call the ship's galley. The ship's cabling runs almost about 2,400 kilometers, which is roughly the distance between Kochi to Delhi.
At present, India has just one aircraft carrier, INS Vikramaditya, built on a Russian platform. But the Navy wants more. They are seeking at least 3 aircraft carriers, one each for the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean, and one as a backup.
The future plans after the commissioning of the ship would involve flight trials and integration of the most important element of the carrier, and that is the combat aircraft. So the ship will be proceeding for trials for integrating the combat element along with the deck element, and proceed for trials and thereafter become a whole combat worthy ship.
The Vikrant is expected to carry 30 aircrafts. This includes the MiG-29Ks. The vessel is said to have a strike range of 13,900 kilometers. It is equipped with 32 missiles, 4 76mm naval guns, and 4 point defense system guns. The Vikrant heads to the sea with a lot of expectations. It is a flagship of India's local production capabilities. It was designed here in India. at the Navy's Warship Design Bureau. It was built by the state-owned Cochin Shipyard Limited. So all eyes will be on Vikrant's performance and also its efficiency on the high seas. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Ousted leaders seldom return to their home countries. If they do, only bad news will await them. Maybe a judicial trial, public protest, or worse. But Sri Lanka's former president is apparently willing to take that risk. Weeks after fleeing the country, Gotabaya Rajapaksa wants to return. His party is already holding talks with the current government. They want to assure Gotabaya will be safe. What are the chances of this risky return? How will Sri Lanka's public react to it?
We are just Sri Lankans here. Sri Lankan citizens are here to save the country, save the motherland.
July 13th, 2022. As Sri Lanka descended into chaos, their president fled. Gotabaya Rajapaksa hitched a military plane to the Maldives. Since then, a lot has changed. A new president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has taken charge. Talks with the IMF are going well. Crisis at Sri Lanka is slowly finding its feet. But the past continues to haunt them. The disgraced ex-president wants to return home. It was unthinkable a few days ago, but Gotabaya Rajapaksa is reportedly keen. His party is seeking assurances from President Wickremesinghe. Safety is the obvious issue. Back in July, Gotabaya did not leave of his own accord. He was forced to flee. Protesters had overrun his presidential palace in Colombo. His gym, his private pool, all of it was taken over by the public. That's when Gotabaya Rajapaksa knew his time was up. He first fled to the Maldives, from there to Singapore, and finally to Thailand. So why return to Sri Lanka now? After all, the security situation has not improved. Gotabaya is still public enemy number one. So what explains his plans to return? According to one source, the money. Staying in Thailand is draining Gotabaya's resources. He must retain a private jet, a presidential suite, and a coterie of security guards. That's several hundred millions of Sri Lankan rupees. If he returns home, he can save a lot. As ex-president, Gotabaya is entitled to state protection and pension. The question is, will the government agree to it? Initially, President Wickremesinghe denied having any knowledge about Gotabaya's return.
I am not aware of anything. He has not told me that he is coming back on the 24th. Neither any people here aware of it.
However, new reports suggest something else. They claim Wickremesinghe has spoken to Gotabaya Rajapaksa, that the two men discussed Gotabaya's return. He is expected to fly back early September. Chances are more protests will welcome him. Activists are demanding legal action against Gotabaya and his ministers. They want him charged for mismanaging Sri Lanka's economy. For Ranil Wickremesinghe, it's a political challenge. If he facilitates Gotabaya's return, he will lose public support. He will be dubbed a Rajapaksa ally. If he doesn't, he could lose support in the parliament. Remember, a majority of lawmakers still belong to Gotabaya's party. So there are no easy choices for the sitting president. As for his predecessor, it's a risky gamble. He escaped the wrath of Sri Lanka's public once. He may not be so lucky the second time. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
That's all we have for you on this episode of South Asia Diary. We'll be back next week with a brand new lineup of stories. Until then, stay safe. I am Mariam Wardak and you are watching WION, world is one.